Hello, welcome to Behind the Wall, your weekly look at China and its complex relationships with Australia and the rest of the world. I'm Stan Grant. Chinese people are no longer able to watch BBC News after the National Radio and Television Administration stopped the network from broadcasting in the country. The administration accused the British national broadcaster of failing to meet the requirement for news to be truthful and fair, and said it harmed China's interests and undermined national unity. The move is just the latest attack on free media under Xi Jinping. Joining me to discuss the complexities on reporting in China is Mike Smith, correspondent for the Australian Financial Review, and Trevor Watson, who was Beijing correspondent for the ABC in the late 80s. Gentlemen, nice to have you with us. Mike, there is a reason that you're not in China, of course, and that very much goes to the reason that the BBC has been banned.
That's right. I mean, my situation was a bit more extreme, I suppose. I mean, it was the Australian government that told me to leave for my own safety. You know, as we know, an exit ban was put on myself and Bill Birtles, and, you know, we had secret police coming to our house in the middle of the night. So we did face quite a lot of harassment and, you know, no detention. But unfortunately, that means we can't go back into China in the medium term.
And Mike, this is all part of what's been a crackdown on the media. This has been underway for many years now, but particularly accelerated under Xi Jinping. What's it like trying to work there as a journalist?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was only there for 3 years, but I really noticed a big change during that time, and particularly after COVID. And obviously, with COVID, we had a lot of travel restrictions, but sort of issues around the origins of coronavirus became extremely sensitive. And look, to be honest, in my final months there, the biggest hurdle was just getting anyone to talk to. And we had contacts in the business world and economists and academics and everyday people who had been talking to the AFR for 16 years, and suddenly they clamped up. They wouldn't talk to us anymore. They said they weren't allowed to talk to us. In some cases, they were just too nervous to talk to foreign journalists at all. And this was also happening sometimes with just ordinary people you try and interview on the street. So that was sort of the biggest hurdle for foreign journalists in China at the moment, I think.
Trevor, your time, of course, goes back several decades. You were there, of course, in 89, right, with the crackdown on Tiananmen Square. And I remember this from my reporting there as well. In those days, you were totally controlled, weren't you? You had to apply for permission to interview anyone, to travel around the country with a government minder.
Indeed, Stan, we weren't allowed to travel more than 50 kilometres outside of Beijing. We had to live in a government-designated compound for foreigners. That compound was guarded by armed police, paramilitaries, largely to prevent Chinese people coming into the compound, having contact with us and having their minds polluted by Western ideas. We weren't permitted to speak to Chinese people in the street. We weren't permitted to speak to anybody, indeed, without the permission of the government. So when I look at Beijing and China as it is now, or has been over the past decade, it looks incredibly free. But I also must say that we were largely left alone. So long as we towed the line on those points that I just made, we were largely left alone. The Chinese government never hauled me in. I was never hauled in by the foreign ministry and dressed down over a story that I'd filed, for example. I was really free to say whatever I liked because at that time China was so closed to the outside world, it really didn't care what I said about it.
And that's really fascinating, Trevor. I spanned that period from where you were totally controlled, as you were, to that period where it was more open, and it got harder when it became more open. There was, of course, the Public Security Bureau who were then overseeing so much of this, and you were deliberately being stopped. People were being detained. I was detained on several occasions. It really shifted as the country apparently opened up more. What does this tell us about China today?
I think that what it says is that China now does care more about what the outside world thinks of it and its actions. When I was there in the late 80s and early 90s, what mattered to China and what mattered to the Communist Party was internal control. Its focus was inward looking. It didn't care, as I said, about what the foreigners thought. And I could whatever we liked at the end of the day. We were simply, outer barbarians, and it didn't matter. Now China is much, much more engaged with the outside world in a variety of good and or bad ways, and it does care about how it's being reported to the outside world.
Mike, let's look at the BBC here. You were able to watch BBC when you were there. You were able to watch CNN. When I worked for CNN, our stories would be blocked. The screen would go black. But what are we seeing happening now with the BBC, and just what will that mean for people in China who may have been able to watch it before?
Well, that's right. I mean, there are not a lot of people generally in China who had access to the BBC. It was sort of mainly in sort of five-star hotels and sort of expat compounds. But and even then, it was still censored. But what's really concerning me now is sort of this sort of targeted campaign in China against the BBC. You see it on Twitter, particularly one of its Australian journalists, Stephen McDonnell. He's sort of copying it from lots of sort of pro-China commentators on Twitter. And look, there's a danger they might decide to kick out the BBC journalists. I mean, they've already done it with many of the Americans. There's no journalists working for Australian media outlets in China. So I'm concerned sort of this is the next phase of what we're seeing in terms of China's curtailment of press freedoms.
A final thought from you here, Trevor, as well. You've got a book that you're editing that we've contributed to, looking at correspondents from Australia who've been based in China. What is the future? What does it look like now for foreign reporters trying to work in China, given what Mike's just outlined there and the concerns now about the future of the BBC?
Yes, indeed, Stan. Our book, The China Bureau, will be out later this year, and it has been written by outstanding journalists like yourself and Mike Smith. I think looking ahead, first of all, I think the point needs to be made that China's action against the BBC is really an attempt to punish the British for having the audacity to protect their interests in a way that wasn't to China's liking. So the moves against the BBC have also got to be seen in that light. I, too, am very concerned about Stephen McDonnell. And I also think that in the brave new world that Xi Jinping seems to be producing, generating, constructing here, I think that he believes that in the future, in the not too distant future, China will be able to do without external scrutiny at all. There'll be no foreign correspondents in China, and any information that we have coming out of China will be via press release from the Communist Party.
Yeah, certainly concerning times, concerns about the future there for people who are working inside the country. Trevor, Mike, good to talk to both of you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.